You're listening to the Disgustingly Resilient podcast, hosted by Aidan Smalley and William Reid, a competitive 40k podcast for the servants of Nurgle and the fallen 14th Legion. Tactics, meta-analysis, and all things Death Guard.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Disgustingly Resilient podcast. My name is Aidan Smalley and today I'm joined by a very special guest because this is the first person to actually take an event win, so not just go 5-0 but take the whole first place as well with Death Guard. I'm joined today by Max. Max, do you want to introduce yourself, bud?
Absolute pleasure to be here.
So Max, tell us a bit about yourself.
So, I'm Max Gwiss. I started playing Warhammer about 3 years ago. Got into the competitive side when the Death Guard book released. That was the first faction I was really into. It unfortunately didn't last that long because I soon realized that the speed is addictive. And that flying very quickly is very fun, and that running a boss toward at 5 inches, it's just not. It didn't do it anymore. It was just it felt too slow. It felt not satisfying. So I've played elves primarily already since very recently. I thought it was fine with elves. Elves are great fun. Elves are perfect. But then 10th edition came along, and well, elves were a bit on the strong side of the power level. And it didn't quite feel satisfying winning with them. So I was demotivated for. And that took a break, and when I came back after the data slate, elves were still a bit too strong. So I was looking for something differently, something new, something. Well, I don't want to call it fresh because it's too tough.
Yeah, we're definitely not fresh.
Yeah, but there's a lot of nostalgia attached to it. I remembered how much fun painting Death Guard was. How much, yeah, it's just a faction that is fundamentally fair, I think, and that's kind of the difference to when you're looking at most of the common top factions right now. Is Death Guard? They don't have any of the fancy tricks, any of the fancy nonsense of the undercosted units. They really say it's just a faction that steps at the table and does the thing, but there's nothing malevolent about this. It's just good old nature bashing in the tent of the table. So that was a lot of the appeal. Yeah,
it's quite funny. I always say Death Guard's quite an honest faction, and like when people ask you at the table, like, "Oh, can you do this?" You're like, "Nope." It's like, "Nope, no tricks. Don't worry. It's just what it is. I can Overwatch, and that's about it. Don't worry."
Yeah, do you have any gotchas? I can't give +1 AP, I guess. So
woo.
Yeah, I mean, it is, of course, we got the new special trick of the -2 to hit effectively. That's kind of the major thing now. But it's also not really unfair. It's you still have counterplay to it. Just don't get close. Like there's always something you can do about Death Guard. They're just, like I said, it's just an honest, fair faction, and there's never a situation where your opponent just starts groaning. It's not like Phantasm, where at the moment you first mention Phantasm, you can already see them giving up. There's a bit of life force just fleeing their body.
Here we go again.
Now, with Death Guard, it's just, even if you lose against Death Guard, it's still you had a brawl. It's not like you could table in turn 2 or something like that.
It's always an army that kind of like, you're going to go all turn 5, even if you're losing against it. It's very rare Death Guard's table and you turn, unless you mess up massively. But yeah, I think I've never had people really complain about playing against Death Guard, and I think it is because it's an honest faction. Although it is interesting to hear you say, like, it's a lot of people assume when someone's faction, like your elves, that you love playing strong, that everyone's happy about it. But as you just said then, it's interesting that a lot of people actually don't enjoy when their faction's overpowered.
Yeah. But yeah, for myself, it's much more that it started as a painting project. I just didn't have these high hopes for what the army does. I only took a look at the index a month ago. There just wasn't a need to before. Like you didn't encounter anybody. Like as long as you won your first game, you were very unlikely to just meet anyone that played Death Guard. It's just incredibly low levels of participation. It just you read the first important 6 indexes, and you never really get around to Death Guard. So for me, it was a lot of the journey was just looking at this with completely fresh eyes, and trying to figure out what does this faction do well. So it was a really interesting journey so far.
No, definitely, and I think Death Guard's it's an interesting faction because you said it's not the power isn't just raw in the face. Like you read Phantasm, and that's just flat out how busted that can be because you just think of all the ridiculous things you can do with it. Whereas Death Guard, a lot of the powers comes from more like setting up certain things, being certain board areas. You have to think more of the long haul of the game rather than just, I'm going to Phantasm this right now, screw that guy over, and then I'll kill him next turn. It's a lot more in-depth in a way, I think.
Yeah, it's also what made it appealing was that there were no trodden paths for the faction. There was just it wasn't as like like when you think of AdMac, it's basically you have the Breacher spam list that is doing well, okay, but nothing really besides that. So you have this already this starting point set for the faction. When it came to Death Guard, you had like Innes a month ago, for example, who got 3-1 with like a Land Raider Hero Hammer list. They're just that is kind of a thing. You had on like when I was reading the Goonhammer article for Start Competing, they featured a lot of Demon Engine spam lists that did well on these very, very empty American tables, like Warzone used them. That's not something that I can translate to WTC tables. So it was just interesting. Yeah.
Sorry, just very quickly, am I correct in thinking that WTC tables are actually one of the most dense setups?
Not anymore. It definitely used to be true in the past. And you always, when you're talking WTC, you always have because the team events, you traditionally had a very wide divergence between how dense it actually is. Right now, it's pretty comparable to, I think, UKTC. You just have a couple of peculiarities. This was played on Alpine Cup terrain, which is basically WTC slightly differently arranged for next year. So for all intents and purposes, it's basically WTC. And in terms of density, it's pretty much where UKTC is, I would say.
Okay. And was scoring also WTC for this event?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things is more that you at times have quite narrow passages for terrain. So things like, for example, a Land Raider. I haven't quite tried this in UKTC in a while, where a Land Raider can go. But as far as I remember, you still have the troubles on some UKTC deployments where you have very narrow lanes and you just often can't quite fit one of the broad vehicles through.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think it's like mission 2 and 4. I think there's only literally one spot you could deploy a Land Raider and get it out your deployment, and if you deploy there, you're basically going to get shot turn 1. So yeah, it's definitely still a thing on UKTC where trying to move some of the larger vehicles in the game can be a bit of a trouble. So that's put me a bit off Land Raiders as well, but I still want to try one at some point. But yeah, definitely right on that one. So I imagine if you have the same issues on WTC with Land Raiders, that's probably a reason that makes you not want to try one so much.
Yeah, like there's just basically you typically have this one lane where you can go if you ever want to, for example, reach the center of the table. That's just the one lane it can go. If you're just happy dropping off your passengers, then you can go another. But it never quite feels great because it's just awkward. Like that's kind of the thing for for most of the dimensions. Like, yes, you can make it work, but is it that much fun to play with? It's always it always just leaves a sour taste in your mouth where you constantly have to measure around corners, and it's one of my least favorite aspects of 40k. It's just trying to make a vehicle monster list, trying to work on the dense table.
I definitely feel the same way. I tried running a Demon Engine list because I know in America they tend to have a lot of player-placed terrain events, and obviously a lot of their events are also generically more sparse, and the Demon Engine lists seem to work better over there as compared to UK or Europe. And I think over here it's because we have those problems of trying to move our vehicles around everything. And I tried it recently, and my God, it's such a miserable, slow game having to go, right, I've got to rotate this here, move this forward, how far can I get around? Or you can just have an infantry and just walk straight through the wall.
Yeah, and you always have the risk that sometimes you just run into an opponent who's special, and you have a lot of negotiating to do when it comes to vehicle movement.
Yeah, it's like, oh, but did you measure the backtrack? It rotated like 2 degrees, and you're like, really, mate? Yeah, we've all ran into that one. But one of the things that's very interesting is, and the one thing that makes this 5-0 event win so special is because you did something that a lot of people would probably call you crazy for in your list. What do you think that is?
Plague Bush crawlers.
Oh,
nobody ever takes them.
Nobody ever takes them. No, I think you know what it is, and that is the fact that you managed to actually win this event running completely Mortulus. Something that people would probably call you insane for. People would probably say he's trying to lose, maybe, because for a lot of people, and including myself, I thought Morty was about as close to an auto take as it gets. But what you managed to obviously prove us wrong. So before we dive into that, do you want to just quickly take us through your list, and then we'll get into what insanity happened at the event and why did you not take Morty?
All right. So for the list, the way I think about it is basically 3 distinct parts of it. The first one is the old triple Plague Bush Crawler. That's kind of, at this point, we're going to come back to indirect in some way. It's just Plague Bush Crawlers that work so far. The other piece, and probably the core of it all, 3 Rhinos, 6 times 5 Plague Marines, 3 Biologos attached, one Biologos per Rhino, all just very nicely symmetrical. And then kind of combining these two are the flex points, which are the Terminators, 2 times 3 Death Shots, 1 Lord of Contagion, 1 Lord of Virulence, and Typhus. And this kind of, and those 3 different parts, they just make the one whole. And I think maybe just let's go straight into White Morty. So
yeah, I think that's everyone's mind. That is the one question.
So I really like all 3 parts. I did like the triple Plague Bush Crawlers because one of the missions was Purge the Foe, so I really wanted to have the 3 mortars in there. Plus the mortars were quite helpful overall, just shaping the game. The actual damage output of mortars, it's fine. They pick up like a utility squad like Warp Spiders or Infiltrators. They pick one up per turn. It's gonna be fine if you shoot them for 5 turns. It's good value, but they're kind of breaking even if they do something like that. Unless you get real quality targets, they're unlikely to win you the game straight up. It's the way I think about the mortars is they are support pieces forcing my opponent into doing something. What I really like about the games that I like to play are kill games. I really like to destroy my opponent's models. Maybe do some in the process, but I hate passive playing games where we're both just jockeying for positions and we move our Rhino 1 inch so we have a slightly better advantage there and we trade and it's a very exact game. At the end of the game, there's still 60% in each side on the board. I don't play this type of game and I hate playing it. So the way that the reason why the mortars are so important here is because I always feel comfortable starting with a list that is really, really good at playing passively. Because what that does in return is it forces my opponent, it communicates that they can't play this passive game. I'm gonna win this. If they want to beat me, they will have to come forward and they're gonna have to play a kill game against me. And this is where I feel most happy. Just having a wonderful massacre in the center of the table. So this is really where the Plague Bush Crawlers come in. Not so much for the actual damage output. It's a bit disappointing. It's a bit unreliable. Like, this is the one thing that Morty, of course, does well. Makes them hit on 3s, gives them real 1s. That's nice. But even with Morty, it's very rare that you look back on a game and think, oh boy, these mortars really killed 1,000 points over the course of a game. Yeah, so I'm always quite hesitant to just invest in a buff piece for a mortar that I bring primarily for the utility, and that already does most of the damage before the game even begins. Against my in round 4 game against Rukai, for example, what it did is it forced the Scourgers off the table just by virtue of existing. So that meant that combined Void Raven Bombers and the Scourgers being off the table, that meant there were no heavy guns on the table that could threaten my Rhinos, so I could deploy the Rhinos straight on the line because there was nothing my opponent could do to hurt them. Just because I had the mortars and he couldn't start Scourgers on the table. So
yeah, that's really clever, that, because we talk a lot about, and especially in the series that we're doing recently, trying to help people who are sort of new to the hobby and new to Death Guard. And we always talk about the role of aggressor and defender in a game, and being able to basically put yourself in a position where the opponent has to make something happen is really good for Death Guard, because the one thing Death Guard doesn't want to be caught in is a position where you have to run across the board to get to them because we're not fast enough to do it. So having the mortars, like you said, by just the sheer point of them existing, regardless or not whether they're doing more damage with or without Morty, etc. Like you said there, he couldn't put his Scourge on the table, but he knew he also couldn't still sit back the entire game because those mortars will still pick up units. Even if it's not as efficient, they're still going to make something happen, whereas you can happily sit behind your walls and be like, you can't touch me, so they have to come to you. And then that's when you, as you said, you're then happy to get into that brawling, let's start killing each other mindset of, like, you know, making things happen, rather than you sit behind a wall, I sit behind a wall, let's see who draws better cards.
Exactly. One of the most efficient ways to increase your own speed is make your opponent move towards you. Like, it doesn't really matter if you're moving 5 inches, if they have to come to you to deny you objectives. Like, if they're on the same objective as your Rhino, your Plague Marines will get a charge off. So this is kind of a really fundamental thing, I think, for Death Guard right now. But we have these 500 points of Plague Burst Crawlers. Then investing, like, Morty gives a substantial buff to it, but you run into a real problem on the table. If you want those buffs, Morty needs to be within 6 inches of them. Trying to actually navigate 3 Plague Burst Crawlers and Morty within an aura on a dense table is quite a task. It doesn't work particularly well, yeah. So it's more like, Morty buffs it, but he typically buffs it for a turn. Unless you were to go with a very extreme variant. This is probably, once again, more of a thing for Adepticon type of tables, where you can actually just start them all in the line and just move forward in the castle. It just doesn't translate particularly well to the denser tables.
Even in my games, it's very common, like you said there. Morty will be buffing 3, definitely turn 1, maybe 3 turn 2, but then it starts dropping down as he moves forward because you can't move everything with him. So then maybe turn 3, he's only got 2 within range. By turn 4, he's just got the 1 following him around. The problem is, like you said, if you're using Morty for 5 turns to buff all 3, Morty hasn't moved. And that's not what you want to be doing with that model.
Yeah. It's kind of, it creates this conflict, this inner conflict for Morty expressed on the table, where he really wants to do stuff. He wants to be the hero. He wants to be the Primarch, marching in the center of the table. But there's also the Plague Burst Crawler that he wants to support. So he just can't quite decide where he wants to go. And this really adds to this level of, how the hell do I to use Morty correctly? How do I use him to the maximum ability when I kind of want to stay back, but I also need to go forward? And exactly when do I just leave those Plague Burst Crawlers behind in the past and look for glory in the center? So it's like, I just want to preface this. I think Morty is a good model. I think his rules are good. He's cheap enough that I forgive him having far less damage output than a carnivore for whatever reason. I forgive him.
5 attacks, woo.
Yeah, 5 attacks. One day.
One day.
Really like to pay 450, yeah, I'd really like to pay 450 and get an actual Primarch datasheet. That would be grand.
That would be cool, but hey, we've got our, it's like our, it's like a Primarch from Wish.com. So like, your budget Primarch.
Well, yeah, for the time being, it is what it is. Like, he's still tanky. He still does something between shooting and fighting. Even with the wings, he's still kind of somewhat a bit mobile when you compare it to some other pieces in Death Guard. He has a great aura in some matchups. Like, it's hard to find something truly wrong with him. But primarily the starting point for me was, I do like all of the other stuff that is in my list. I did like the 500 points of Plague Squads. The non-negotiable for me were the Rhinos with MSU Plague Moons in there. They're kind of the absolute core of the list, mentally. And then I also, if I wanted to fit 325 points of Morty in, I can only bring one unit of Dash Shrouds and a cheap character.
Yeah.
So, for me, the starting point really was I did want that second unit of Terminators with a good character, and I need Typhus as anti-ink contact. I need those two pieces. I can't quite fit Morty in. How bad is it? What am I really losing if I leave him aside for now? I didn't get a single test game before. It was kind of really more of a frustration. I wanted all of the other things. I couldn't quite get the playstyle right for Morty between him, where I could position him, where I could place him, so that I can get the maximum out of him. I just couldn't get it done. It felt like I needed
trying to get that balance.
Test game. Yeah, it just felt like I needed another dozen test games, and I needed give me another month of preparation, and should be fine. But for now, I just wanted something that was simpler. Because like I said, in a lot of ways, you just have this constant question for Morty. You don't want to be seen early on, because there's gonna be like a random bright lance going through, you failing your 4-up, and suddenly there's 8 damage on Morty. It felt, maybe makes I feel no pain or two. But then you're just talking about a Morty who, like, on 10 wounds. Morty on 10 wounds is not the same as Morty on 16 wounds.
Yeah.
So there's always this risk. You kind of need to hide him. You need the prime hiding spot for him. And Morty basically, roughly, with the rings, takes up the space of 2 Rhinos. That makes when you have Morty and 3 Rhinos, deployment does become tricky, because there's just not that an amazing amount of hiding space where you can just fit everything in. Because Morty again has a lot of the same goals as Rhinos. Where do Rhinos want to go? They want to go to the objectives, not be shot at while they're there. And what's Morty want to do? He wants to end up eventually in a position where he can be threatening. Because the turn you show Morty, he needs to be an actual threat. What Morty really does is that Morty needs to be shot at. The worst thing that can happen in the whole wide world is Morty just being ignored. People just not taking him seriously. People just laughing at Morty. Look at that fool. It just makes him sad. And it just makes me sad, because really you pay so much for his durability that you need to take advantage of it.
He looks so pretty. He's got to do something. He's looking so pretty. He's nicely painted. He's sat there in the middle of the board. Your opponent can see him and they're just not even paying him attention. How rude.
Yeah. But yeah, so people ignoring Morty, that would be really bad. What you want ideally, like the perfect scenario, is people shooting Morty, bring him down to like two wounds or so, Then he survives another, and maybe you heal him up. Most importantly, you still have the aura. And what it really did is it saved the rest of your army from being shot. Yeah. Like toughness 12 with a 2+4 up and so on. That's a solid defensive profile. I've seen like, especially when you talk about the middling offensive output armors. I think, for example, Tyranids. They really struggle taking that Morty efficiently. If you don't just place him in front of 12 zone drops, I guess. But that's that's on you.
That's a misplay.
Yeah.
That's not Morty's fault. That's your fault.
But yeah, I had this too many times where Morty just went forward and people just were unimpressed, ignored him. Then Morty just went in, rolled 2 1s to hit, rolled a 2 to wound, and it just, that's 1 invul, and you kill a Terminator. That's it. That's what it does. Opponents, at a lot of the times, it's one of those models where a lot of the learning curve from an opponent's perspective is just knowing that he just isn't half as scary as it looks like.
Yeah, especially after that first combat when you go into something like Terminators, and they're sat there like, oh, I guess I'll get ready to pick up my squad, and then you end up killing one, and then they're just like, oh, he's actually not a threat, and then they learn from then on, I don't have to worry about him.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing with him. Like, he's hard to play correctly, and there's always the element of your opponent having the option to react accordingly, and either do nothing or like probably the worst thing, not even doing nothing, is, but if they have one of those super combos. There's a couple of those across the game where it just click at something and it disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as long as a Morty enjoyer, you identify these. You identify these potential death traps. Then it keeps you from certain parts of the table. So your opponent didn't even need to use his super deadly combo to just one-shot Morty. It just you already kept yourself from the perfect position there yourself. Where am I going with this? Right, back to why did it not take Morty?
No, it's all good points though. Like you are right, because you correct. I've had games where I've had playing Morty, saw my opponent has like a 10 Wraithguard brick. If that ever gets the chance to like phantasm into range of Morty and fire all 10 guns at him, even with his great defensive profile, there's a good chance if he rolls enough 6s or fate dices them, like he's dead, like straight up. So I can't risk going near that unit, but that unit has, it can move, it can phantasm. So it's such a large area of the board that Morty just can't realistically go to, because if he does and they punish him, I just lose him. So you are right on that one.
Yeah, like we've got a perfect example. It's always there's always the risk that when you're playing Morty, you're always living on the edge. It's always a couple of failed invulsives away from utter catastrophe. It's probably just a bit too much for my heart. I just like reliability. Like I just don't want to. Yeah, I just don't want to see him get hurt.
Picking up Morty's the worst feeling in the world.
So what not bringing Morty does for you, it's I think it does create the reliability that in a lot of ways you need, because there's also games where Morty does a lot of really cool stuff where he just tanks a lot. Well, all of his attacks connect, and it feels really good. But for each of these games, like we said, you already have the other games. He just fails a couple of 4-up invulns and just dies, or he never gets to the right position, or you just misjudge the timing. So
yeah, you pass every single 4-up against damage 2 weapons, and then fail every single 4-up against like D6 plus 2.
Yeah, so like one of the major conceptual differences between like a 4-1 list and a 5-0 list is this level of reliability. You can build a lot of lists that I think can go 4-1 because they, for example, just get lucky with the pairings. You play a skew, and you just get paired into lists that can't handle this. Like say you bring 40 Terminators, maybe you just get someone. Maybe you just get paired to someone who just can't deal with that. And quite honestly, I don't think there's that many lists that could deal with that. But you will inevitably find a list that actually has the tools, has the damage output, or you just fail enough 4-up saves just knock at this. So across a 5-round event, what you're really looking for when it comes to success is simply having a list that does not have the pure stack check potential. Like creating this stat check skew where you just tell your opponent, you can't kill this. That works fine if you play a really undercosted book. Think 9th edition Tyranids towards the end, where we're just, I'm basically playing I can bring 50% more units than you from a cost efficiency perspective. I can bring so much stuff. You just can't really do anything about it, and it doesn't matter what you do. I'm just going to move forward, and I'm going to kill you. Death Guard is not 9th edition Tyranids.
No, definitely not. Don't remind me of 9th edition Tyranids, please. Yeah. God.
So for me, it was kind of the starting point was I was in a depression. Death Guard is an underdog. They got a couple of cool new tricks. They do have these fancy new toys because you can fit in so much stuff now. You have 200-300 points more on the table. Cool. But it's still the data sheets. They still have a lot of the things that just feel bad. It's still just basically marine profiles with +1 toughness. That's fine. So my idea initially was, I'm gonna run a skew list. For example, the very first list was Rotigus and Morty, and 40 Plague Moons and Runners, and we're just gonna rush to primary. We're just gonna rush there. We're gonna sit on objective, and it's gonna be fun. Well, not fun necessarily, but it's gonna be a game.
Stuff's definitely gonna happen.
Yeah. I don't even mind Rotigus. I think he's actually quite interesting, but he basically just creates you're gonna run a board control skew. The moment you bring Rotigus and Morty, you're running a very heavy skew already.
Yeah, I was actually doing an Allies deep dive recently, which I need to upload at some point. But when I was covering Rotigus, when I looked at his points as well, I was like, you know what? This guy's actually not bad. He's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. If you can get him onto the center of on the midboard, onto an objective, you can plot him down on an objective. He's solid. It's more like getting him there and so on. And again, just the risks you run when you bring a model like him.
That was kind of
that was the first idea. I need to find the niche that Death Guard has. I found a niche and then just go all in on this one trick that they do. So kind of I didn't quite like the purely play primary, basically be chaotic orcs. I didn't quite like this, so I went along with a couple of hero hammer lists, which is kind of taking this approach of you just provide too many targets. You're playing Russian dolls with your rhinos. You just go on an objective. If they kill the rhino, you're just gonna have 4 activations again, just to clear all of the models of the objective, and you're gonna get primary this way. It's an interesting one, and I think a lot of the characters are underestimated as solo pieces. But the real problem you run into with this is that you give up a bit too much punch, typically. Like the Hero Hammer list, they run into a problem that quite quickly you find that there's durability issues out there, that your fancy plays you run into a brick wall. You just don't quite have the punch with your fancy Chaos Lords jumping out of the rhinos. 3d3 mortal wounds is cool when your opponent brings a Cursed Cultist, for example, and you just have 38 wounds or 30 wounds in one brick. Your 5 mortal wounds you did, who cares?
Yeah.
it doesn't put a dent in that unit. So there's a bit of a problem with the Hero Hammer list. It kind of was throughout all of this testing that I realized that Plague Marines are actually the real stars of the show. It was across all of the different this concept that I tried. It was always the Plague Marines that were the most reliable thing. They were just always, whenever I had after the game, just sat down, just what went right, what performed. It was always Rhinos plus Plague Marines. They do what I want them to do.
Just very quickly. So just for people that are listening to this one, now Max has been interviewed by Tomic on Contact Lost, and in that interview, which is on the channel now, please go check it out. He does fantastic work. He goes into the game-by-game breakdown of the event. We might touch on some here, but because we don't want to just be repeating content, basically, I don't want to obviously just undermine Tomek's efforts and Max's efforts. Obviously, I don't want to have Max repeating everything he's repeated yesterday. So I think on this episode we're going to be more looking into the list. We will touch on to some of the actual games, possibly, for examples of why the Plague Marines. I've mentioned this because, as you're mentioning Plague Marines now, I'm really interested to know, because I'm starting to dabble in Plague Marines myself. I'm really interested to know, because obviously you just said after every game it was the Plague Marines and the Rhinos that put in work. So very interested to hear this bit coming up. But I try to let people know, for a full game breakdown of his event, go check out Contact Loss podcast with Tomek and Max, and they will have all of it there. We're going to be focusing more on the list here, sort of where we think Mortulus lists can go, Plague Marines, etc. We will cover some bits, but just want to clarify that now. Go check both podcasts out. They're great content there. And yeah, sorry, carry on, Max.
Righty. Plague Marines, yeah. So I think transport lists in general are in a very strong spot in the meta right now, and we see a bunch of different concepts across factions popping off now, like mechanized sisters, for example. Why? Because Rhinos. Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, it's whenever it comes to a chassis like a Rhino, you run into a problem that if you want to shoot a Rhino with Plague Marines off an objective, you need 3 activations. Getting 3 activations on a hidden model, that is a tall order in a lot of ways. So you quite often run into the situation where, for example, you need that one unit that opens up the Rhino. Then you have to set up a chosen. Say you have a unit of obliterators. You drop the obliterators down. Your plan is you are just going to open up the Rhino, and then you put your chosen forward, and they're going to charge whatever pops out of the Rhino. The problem with that is that that's already a lot of different parts of the plan where it can all just fail. If you ever roll out Nurgle obliterators going with a melter profile into a Rhino, that's a really solid fail chance. Even within 12 inches, that might or might not work. It's actually, it's like a 50-50 chance. If it doesn't, then you don't just have your fancy units of chosen, super efficient unit, you just run them into a Rhino. Which doesn't. It's never a good feeling from a Chaos Space Marine player's perspective to just put chosen into a Rhino. Yeah, but it's also that even if they open it up, now you have these 2 units of Plague Marines. You just deploy them in a way that they can only charge one of the Plague Marine squads. Right? That's wonderful.
Yes.
That is an 80-point unit. Plague Marines are really, really cheap now. They're the
so
price
cheap.
of what Zangos were in the previous edition if you just gave them a banner.
Oh my god, that's actually true. That's actually insane. I didn't think of that.
It's and the one thing about this is when you're running 30 Plague Marines compared to 60, you don't have any hopes for these Plague Marines to actually survive dedicated firepower. They're still Marine bodies with toughness 5. They die. If there's any serious firepower into them, they die. So that's already one of the big differences when you're thinking about this, is that this is a Death Guard list that wants to hide behind a wall, not be shot at, and play a tricksy game into your opponent. Which is kind of a weird starting point for Death Guard, not quite where I envisioned them to go, but here we are. We're playing a tricksy game, sitting behind walls, forcing bad trades from our opponent by just giving them Rhinos and cheap stuff to charge into and shoot into. So, like I said, what makes the Plague Marines in the MSU variant? We're gonna maybe talk about big Plague Marines a bit later on, but for the MSU variant, this is really what it's all about. You just constantly give your opponent bad options. It's an 80-point unit. They can't take much firepower, but it's also not trivial. They're also not cultists, for example. They're still Marine bodies, so you need something that can deal with Marine bodies. So, yeah. The opening move for this list, for example, is basically always identical across all of the games. If I go first, the Rhinos move up, advance behind the wall, and stay there. The Plague Crawlers sit behind the wall and start shooting mortars. And if that sounds really boring to you, well, that's because it is. That's the opening gambit. And from here on, it's really the ball is in the opponent's court. He has to do something about the runners. He needs to try to find tools to how to deal with the runners behind the wall now. And all the while, it's kind of a clock ticking. You lose a utility squad each turn to the mortars, and that's the runners on objectives now. So it's like a very interesting perspective or question, just how your opponent reacts to it. Because while the list might look a bit boring or like the games would be similar, every single game just goes down a different path. Just because you ask the opponent a question, and depending on what tools they have and what decisions they make, they have to answer the question of the rhino on the objective behind the wall. That's where it really becomes interesting for me. But yeah. Like MSU Plague Marine squads, they just give you these options for both on a safety level. They can hold your own objectives, or they give you these cheap 80-point tools to deny objectives, which is an absolutely crucial thing to do when it comes to 20-0 scoring, which is battle point differentials, because I don't really much care how many points I score. A lot of my games, like I'm happy scoring a high 70s, for example. I don't care. Yeah. I don't need battle points. What I need to do is keep my opponent as low as possible. That's kind of where you can... This is why I play fixed secondaries primarily these days. Just because I want that reliability in the score. I was
going to ask you if you take fixed or that's is it always fixed?
Yeah, it's like a 30 points. 25, 30 points depending on what you pick, how the game goes. You don't need those 40s. Whatever for, you don't get rewarded for it in 20-0. But what it's really about is I just want reliability. Like what happened about turn 5, for example, in my round 5 game was that I played Tactica because I had this game plan, but just before the game, I had this brilliant idea to just switch it up a bit. Go for something.
A bit risky.
Yeah, you can already hear the regret in my voice. But now, of course, I went tactical, and what do I draw? I draw Bring It Down. I guess an Elder List completely hidden.
Nice.
And I draw Capture Enemy Outburst. I just, okay.
Did I just
potentially throw my game just because I want to get fancy? God damn it, me.
So what were you actually taking as your fixed? Did it change game to game, or was it always the same?
I mean, when you go fixed, you pick Teleport almost. It's the one good. There's no way around it. You just have your Nurglings, you just have your Rhinos, you just have everything. Teleport Thomas is just the gold standard for fixed, and then you just decide. To me, it comes down to I like Storm Hostile for the missions where your opponent needs to play the middle of the board primary.
Yes.
Like when you play Vital Ground, when you play Search Supply Drop, you just can't afford not to play the middle objectives and try to hold them on your own, because you're gonna get slaughtered in the primary. And trying to play around Storm Hostile, it's quite tricky. So I like it there. Like worst case, it helps me get additional primary points.
Yeah.
For the others, it just depends a bit. Cleanse, like the cleanse is a 10 plus one, where if you put it in play safe, you have this one objective that is really safe. You just put a bunch of Nurglings on there, and after you drive your Rhino onto it, you can just do cleanse there for 10. And then you just take whatever you can take later on, I would say. I say cleanse is a perfect one when you don't need your Nurglings in a specific position. Like, say, against Orcs, for example, where you really want your Nurglings to apply the management hit aura.
Yes.
That's the value there. But if you play, for example, against Knights, you just don't really need Nurglings. Like, they can move block a bit, they can tag. maybe they need to screen somewhere or stand in the way, but it's more like they're pretty niche in this situation. So using them to just do extra actions, that's fine in this scenario. There's always the option for like the corner deployments where you pick engage. It just engage is like it's like a 10-point secondary, right? You just have a very safe spot in a corner where your opponent just doesn't care, and you just place a unit of Merklings there. They're going to live happily behind a crate, and they're just going to have fun. All they need to do this game is just sit behind the crate and cackle. And you're gonna have and you're just gonna have it's gonna get your 10 points there. Maybe you get the bonus one depending on where your Terminators land, so you get the fourth quarter. But for the most part, you're gonna 10-12 points there. And that's fine.
You're happy with that. You're more than happy to take 12 on that.
Yeah, like 12 plus 15 for teleport homers. That's 27 already. That's good enough. Yeah. Maybe a bonus part here and there, and you're on your 3rd and you're fine. Right. How did we get here? Oh yeah, the 9 points.
Yeah, the 9 primary.
Yeah, the 9 primary. Yeah. Let's talk about secondary. Brilliant. Shut down. For like 20-0 scoring, what you need to do is just be able to have the tools to crush a game. Like the moment your opponent shows any signs of weakness, shows any signs of being a bit of a seal, makes some mistakes, you need to be there to pounce on it and crush that game. The moment there's blood in the water, you gotta be a shark. You just have to push forward. So it's very hard to play something like an inherently immobile and defensive list. Think of a Plague Bush Crawler castle, and maybe you, bring a Soul Grinder in there as well, and you just sit back and you just grind your opponent out and plan to win by 2 points. You can't do that in 20-0. It's inherently a quite aggressive style of scoring, how it shapes the game. So just having the expendable tools with Plague Marines there, they can just go in and here's 80 points. I'm gonna deny you these 5 primary points there, and that's fine. You do something about them. That's just good value. And it's also one of the reasons why I just don't like having 10 Plague Marines in a Rhino. It's just because with the moment I bring 10 Plague Marines, I need them to do stuff. Because you don't just bring 10, you bring them with the Biologos, so you're paying at least 210 points, and that's a unit that needs to get stuff done. Whereas an 80-point Barebone Plague Marine squad, I don't care whether you live or die, you fools. You're just gonna jump out of the Rhino and you're gonna sit on the objective until you get shot. That's life.
You either score a couple points or take it off them, and that's it.
So that kind of explains the Rhino. I think we're still partially in me explaining my list in a very roundabout way for 15 minutes now.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to just talk about how the list functions in this. That's no problem with me. One of my questions I had actually, I do have a couple of questions for how you play the list, is when you deploy your Rhinos, you say obviously the goal is to advance them turn 1 and get them behind a building. Now, do you find yourself splitting your Rhinos equally, like one on the left, one on the right, one down the middle, or do you kind of like collapse on one flank particularly, or is it again matchup dependent, game dependent?
I think for me, like when I think about how when I approach the missions, my starting point is simply 1 Rhino for left, 1 Rhino for middle, 1 Rhino for right. And from this starting perspective, we're just going to adapt. I think I'm very rarely using my Rhinos to overload the flank. I always like to have the tools in specific parts of the board where I just have options. What I use for flexibility are the Terminators. These are like the 500 points where I use them to, for example, say, we're going to play this flank this game. This is where my 500 points are going to go. But for the Rhinos, I really quite like the symmetrical approach to the board, which has a couple of advantages. It makes you, for example, quite resilient to move blocking, because you just go for every single way that you have 2d3 deployment zone, there's a rhino there. We're gonna play every single escape route, so you can't block us all in. But it's also it makes it conceptually a bit easier, because sometimes your opponent just doesn't quite have the same idea about the mission. And one significant disadvantage for this list is that it has 2 Nurglings, right? It has 3 Rhinos and 3 Plague Bush Crawlers. Everything else starts a Deep Strike, and so you have 5 drops before you need to declare your Rhinos. That's far less than typically your opponent has these days. Like if I'm planning to outdrop my opponent, I'm planning to bring at least 10 drops, which I just can't do with this list. So this if I'm telling my opponent that I'm going to put 2 runners here, and I'm going to put this objective, I'm going to put 1 runner towards the center, and I'm not going to have a single runner over that objective, that's a lot of information to give up.
Yeah.
And if it just does something very basic, it just screens Rappling Grass Terminators far away from the objective, I've just given up the option for me to ever get there and ever play that objective. So I think I just like to keep it simple. Left, middle, right. Yeah. And then we're just going to see what happens during the game. Plague Moons aren't quick when they leave a runner, but 8 inches, it's still... you still, over the course of the game, you can... If it turns out that, for example, your opponent just does not pressure your neutral objective at all, you will still be able to, for the late game, shift your Rhino over to, for example, the middle, and just have a second wave of Plague Moons there. So you have some options to shift, but mostly, of course, it's the Death Guard feeling. Once you are there, in a part of the board, you are there to stay.
Yeah, that's true. One other question I had for the Plague Marines is, so, for example, the opponent has their natural objective held, yeah? You have a Rhino that can put Plague Marines either, let's say you can charge onto the objective and charge the unit that's on it, or you can guarantee with an advance you're just going to step on the objective and deny their primary because you've got the OC. Now, the unit you're going to charge has a chance that if you fail, will be able to swing back, and they have damage 2 weapons, so they could kill your Plague Marines. Would you still risk the charge to get some value and damage out of the Plague Marines, or would you just take the advance because you don't care about the value, all you care about is denying the primary?
That just, I think, depends how desperate am I. It's just a situation where I just need this to work, then I'm gonna charge. If it's just something where I'm in a comfortable spot, I don't really need to do I just don't need to do anything fancy, I just need to win, then I'm gonna advance them. I think it's kind of just, do I need an element of risk in my life, or can I just play safe?
Yeah, so if you're already ahead and you just need to keep them down, you could just do the advance. Whereas if maybe you're a bit more behind than you want to be, maybe you have to do risk, that charge going right and that kill happening.
Yeah, like I'm taking, if this is my avenue to win, I'm gonna take that charge, because there's just sometimes you just gotta risk a charge, or just gotta risk a good spike roll, just in order to win a game.
100%,
that's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I've had it before where I've had to make I've looked at a game and you think, okay, I can either play it safe here and I get a really close loss, or I can try this 11-inch charge, and if I get it, I'm back in the game. And you go for the 11-inch charge, and sometimes you make it, and then there's a game back on. It all depends what you want as a player. Do you want to try and go 5-0, or are you happy to take a 4-1 with a good score? It's swings and roundabouts. You take your risk at your own, their discretion. But sometimes the risky play is the play that's right.
Yep, absolutely agree there. It's also kind of conceptually, maybe, just to put a bit of a spotlight there when you're just making up a game plan. Sometimes you just have a matchup that you just can't win if you play this properly. Say you've played this matchup. Say you really struggle into elves, for example. You've played this 5, 6, 7, 8 times. You always get crushed, and you know that if you do the same thing again, you're gonna get crushed again. Maybe if you just play it safe, you're gonna get a close loss. This is just something that you have to decide for yourself in a situation. Are you happy with the close loss, or is it time to do something differently? I had this just the other day in an event for a team game where we needed 19 points to win to draw the round. We were really down, and I was playing against Tao on a pretty open table. So it was just, I can play this for a draw. If I just play this defensively, if I just sit behind, we don't get rewards. We don't get prizes for a draw in this case. If I get 10 points, we still lose. So it was just, I'm just gonna deploy in the line, I guess.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Just gonna win the roll-off, I lost the roll-off, and my opponent's 3 piranhas just killed 2 rhinos and the squad of flake marines, and it was just, I guess I just lost that. But it was still the correct play to just go for in this situation for the big win. And sometimes it's the same in singles. You just know how a matchup goes, and there's just if you play it normally, just gonna lose this. So just don't be afraid to sometimes. You don't want to do this consistently. You don't want to consistently go for the 11 charges, but sometimes it's just the play to make.
Yeah, sometimes it's just the only option you got, and you got to take it. So another thing I want to ask about your list is, because we've obviously talked about MSU Plague Marines and how efficient they are for 80 points. People would probably be asking, so why are you bringing the Biologist Putrefires? Because if all you care about is an efficient 80-point unit, why are you shoving a 50-point character in it? So what would you say to those people that would ask that?
If there's one thing you can question, it should not be the Biologist. The Biologist is always worth it. It's the single greatest model in the entire book. So I will forgive you, or your imaginary you. I will forgive you ignorance. Although I actually got a comment the other day about someone's friends reading the list and thinking the Biologist was a waste. And some people, they just need new friends. If you don't respect the Biologist, you ain't a friend of mine. But yeah,
it is the best. But just for people listening, it is genuinely probably the best unit in our book. So I'm not asking this question, but it's just Jimmy, made up Jimmy is asking this question.
Provocative.
Yeah.
So what it does is it actually gives damage to a unit, because lethal 5s. It also gives lethal hits to every weapon that doesn't have lethals, which, for example, is plasma guns. Like, the free plasma gun you just get on your Plague Marine champion because it's in the box, I guess. Or actually, it's not in the box. I had to buy them 3D printed.
It was in the starter set, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Who even knows anymore how this stuff works?
No, I don't.
But so yeah, what you have is, like, normally you have this unit with 4 plasma gun shots. It's like, you don't really want to overcharge it because there's an actual risk to do this. But the moment you talk about lethal 5s, then overcharging, for example, the unit does start to have some real ranged output that catches a lot of people by surprise. Because you just have these 6 shots with damage 2 and the D6 from the Biologos, all with lethal 5s. And if you, for example, drive your Rhino forward, you get the average 11 shots from a Rhino, and then you get the other 6 damage 2 shots from the other Rhinos. And then, of course, you do the greatest thing of all times: you throw grenades. You put a 1 CP, throw them with the regular boring blend squad first, then you use your free squad from the other Biologos. And now suddenly it just really starts adding up, because talking about 6 mortal wounds, and then you talk about the 9 shots with damage 2 with lethal 5s, followed by the 6 shots, the 6 other shots with damage 2, and then you have a Rhino. Rhinos occasionally just put a couple of lethals through. Rhinos do quite a surprising amount, yeah. Occasionally they just get lucky, get a couple of lethals through. So yeah, you're really talking about this these mid-20 to 30 shots that are coming your way, in addition to the mortals, and people just don't quite see it coming.
No, definitely.
And this is what the Biologos really does for you. It gives you that burst damage. The way I set up many of my games, where I need to, is that I'm trying to get my opponent to commit into me, and then just go for this big burst turn where everything jumps out of Rhinos. Everything jumps Rhinos. I have a rapid ingress turn with the squad and so on. And that puts a that list actually puts us a deceptive amount of damage out. It's something, one of these comments that I get a lot is that this can't handle vehicles, or this can't, it just doesn't have damage. It's because it's really hard to underestimate that amount of burst damage when you just throw 4 grenades, when you just have these 60 shots. In addition to just the melee output. Like, everyone thinks about Plague Marines as a pure melee squad, or like pure chaff squad, what have you. Yes, they have some melee weapons. I don't trust their melee weapons. It's more like melee is a tool to get to places.
Yeah.
So it's really a deceptive amount of burst damage that this list puts out, but just by jumping out of a rhino and just blasting away at people.
I mean, if you manage to line up all 4 activations of grenades, that's average 12 mortal wounds there. And then you also have Typhus in your list, who can also chuck out an additional D6. That's enough to drop most things in the game, like especially like if it's a big like core vehicle or something. Like, if you want it gone, that's before any shooting or any melee. It can be just gone from mortal wounds.
Yep. It's also worth noting about the grenade. It's not an attack, so you circumvent a lot of the defensive tools. So if you think, for example, nits, with Invasion Fleet kind of being the old new meta for nits, they can only activate their 5+3 no pain stratagem once you're targeted by an attack. So you just throw your grenades first on like a Maleceptor. You do 6 mortal wounds to a Maleceptor, and at that point, you're not talking about this really dreadful beast with 14 wounds and a 5+3 no pain. You're just talking about an 8-wound beast which then has a 5+3 no pain. So that's quite a nice, interesting thing about the grenade strat. But yeah, it's something that is very easy to miss. I do mention it every single game, but every single game my opponent is also just surprised again that, wait, you can do that, huh? Well, that's interesting.
Yes.
It's an up and coming.
I can do that.
Yeah. It's my trick. It's my trick.
It's my one trick.
You have to big catches.
Oh, but it's good. So, go on, carry on. If you got any more points for the biologist, carry on.
Now, I think the Biologus, it's that one thing that I'm not going to defend. It's a Biologus. He's in. It's 150 points. We're taking Biologus. We're taking them.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. So we've sort of gone over the Biologus. We've sort of gone over the Plague Marines' role and how they play with the Rhinos. So we have the Terminators. So another thing I imagine our very foolish imaginary person's going to ask is, you've got 3 Terminator characters, but only 2 units of Terminators. What are you doing, Max?
Oh no. Well, like I said, my background was running a lot of Hero Hammer solo characters. He's actually surprisingly good as like a solo character. Well, there are a lot of evidence, for one, if you need his buff to apply, because what is easier to fit into like a corner than 3 death shots and a character? Well, a single character.
Really?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Pro tips today. So if you just want, for example, to just have the buff, because there's like a war for it, you're playing against a really squishy list, and you just want to mortar them down, play passively, mortar them down, and you just want the buff from him, yeah, sure, drop him into a corner somewhere. Just have him go solo. It's the same with Typhus, for example. What I really want from Typhus in, for example, the Elder matchup is the juicy mortal wounds.
Yes.
Because you know what the Incon doesn't like?
Mortal wounds.
Yeah. So, Typhus is like the reason I will, until things change, I will always include Typhus is simply the Incon. I need to have that bit of mortal wounds in Deep Strike that can come down, give me that extra bit of burst damage against the Incon. Yeah. He can roll a 1. Yes, we all have stories about where Typhus just rolls a 1. It happens.
Yeah,
you can also roll. Yeah,
you play a dice game, like you can just roll 1s as well on anything. It happens.
Yeah, But when you combine double grenade strat and Typhus on an incon, you're talking about it's not a dead incon, but you are very well on your way to killing the incon.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the crucial part where I want Typhus. And it's also, Typhus is just not a bad fighter.
No, he's
just
pretty good.
not bad as a solo character, yeah. He's a pretty beefy guy. You need to have something dedicated to him. And even then, if you just try to blink wounds off him, he moves 5 inches. It's just a very speedy boy, Typhus.
I don't know why. I think it's the hooves. I don't know.
I don't mind though. I'm gonna take this gift.
No complaints. I'll take my 5 inch move.
He's alive, and he's coming for you.
Gotta go fast.
Yeah, so like Typhus is something you can occasionally you just drop him in your pot. Like a 50mm base, it's something that is not trivial to screen out. It just takes some dedicated thought process behind it. And on some scenarios like sweep engagement, trying to consistently prevent a 50mm base from touching your deployment zone, that's a tall order. So what Typhus is just good for, he can, for example, drop down, just do a teleport homers, do his shooting abilities, and then demand to be taken care of. Because otherwise he's just gonna slow and steadily walk towards your opponent's objective, all while doing teleport homers and shooting mortal wounds.
Yeah.
So he's just a very nice solo piece. He can, of course, go into the death shots. That is primarily for the matchups where -1 to hit combined with -1 weapon skill is an actual problem for your opponent to deal with.
Yeah.
So this is an option that he has, but typically Typhus is to run solo.
That's fair. So question just quickly then, because we just mentioned obviously taking him in combination with the Contagion. What Contagion did you find yourself most using with this list, or is it again matchup versus matchup dependent?
-1 weapon skill, ballistic skill is the standard, I think. I think that's kind of across most lists, across most matchups. This is kind of the one you want. Basically, my cheat says that I want -1 save against anything that reeks of Dark Angels. Any of the 2+ Armor of Contempt skews that Space Marines really like, since, I don't know, I guess Out of War said it. Against those type of lists, like here, 10 Deathwind Knights, and you have a Land Raider Redeemer with Aggressors, and you have like 3... I guess these days you just have 3 Redemptors, and I guess another Land Raider, and what have you.
It's an annoying list.
Yeah. Like this type of list, against Leagues of Votann, if they go for the 2+ route, which means 20 to 30 half guard,
lots of fortresses,
attack land fortresses, that's very useful to have here. But outside of that, I think -1 save is quite niche. I'm increasingly considering them in the Chaos Knight matchup, because I just want to have that extra bit of damage in melee.
Yeah.
And also force them to occasionally spend points on CP on rotate Iron Shield. So each time they rotate, they just have fewer points for what am I saying with rotate? Basically, the point, just have a bit more damage output in that matchup. Against Imperial Knights, I would still always go for -1 weapon skill, but Chaos Knights, them basically all hitting and shooting on 2+, that makes that Contagion quite a bit worse, unfortunately. So that's probably the other matchup, but it's primarily a tool to overcome skews.
That's fair.
Like heavy defensive skews. You don't need it against Nits, for example, on -1 OC, it's Necrons, I suppose. That's pretty much I haven't seen many Necrons around now these days, but if you meet a Silver Titleist, that's the time you pick that. It's also interesting in a couple of niche ones that purely try to play the mission. You can make an argument against Orcs if they did not go for heavy damage and purely go like a 6 truck list that, for example, went a bit heavy on speed boys, stuff like that. I think you can. But I mean, if they bring speed boys, they're OC1 anyway. So
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, you see, I'm really running into trouble actually finding use case for this one. Yeah, it's probably the most niche one. It can come up. I think against Drukhari, it would have been better. But how often is it that you just play against Drukhari who win 3-0?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's founded from weapon skill, ballistic skill, basically every time. Yeah,
that's fair. So another interesting unit in your list is Lord of Contagion. A lot of people write off Lord of Contagion is in the list, correct?
Yeah, I was very shocked that you gave him a C tier rating.
I'm warming to him. I need to play him. I think I need to play him as well.
Justice to my boy. Brave Injustice.
I want it to be good because I love the model. So convince me why I should move him up a tier.
Sure. It's primarily because he pushes the first thing is reliability. Death shots, like a melee unit, they typically get this one chance for greatness. Because melee is a really dangerous space, and like you just don't want your death shots to whiff in that one turn they committed, and before they inevitably die. So I can't tell you the amount of times where I just like 12 attacks and I roll 5 ones and well, cool.
Yeah.
Basically just
great.
Yeah, wow, you had one job and you're failing at your job.
Womp womp.
So it's not a big increase from the perspective of averages, but what it really does is just when I put the Lord of Contagion in there, I know that they will just hit. They will hit their attacks. Maybe they drop one attack, but that's primarily it. The big advantage that the Lord of Contagion has over his competitors is damage 3.
Yes,
which is a very relevant thing these days. Think, for example, Chosen. The difference between, for example, a Lord of Virulence and a Lord of Contagion, it's just massive. It's absolutely massive when it comes to picking up that. Like the Lord of Contagion, if you give them extra AP, he basically just picks up like 5 models by himself. That's just really relevant output from meta perspective.
Wraithguard has 3 wounds as well.
Yeah, but the thing about Wraithguard is it's unless your opponent really
it's very hard to charge him. I was just trying to think of more things where damage 3 is really good, but yeah, Chosen is a massive one as well. Yeah, aggressors, even aggressors as well.
Yeah, but he also has a sweep profile, which again is just not something you have with a lot of the other characters, where you just have 5 attacks. He also has the 10 sweep attacks, 11 with the David Patterson. Yeah. That really pushes the unit to, when you talk about a unit that has like 29 attacks, the full rewards, and you get like 29 hits out of it. That's just a very solid against a Cursed Cultist, for example, where you just don't really want to use the big attacks because your opponent still has the option to put it on the small guys and switch around there. But the moment you just have say, here's 29 hits from this unit, that is a unit position to just pick up most of the squad. Or it just goes against. It just becomes a very versatile profile.
Yeah. Do you ever find yourself re-rolling everything sort of like for fishing for lethal hits and even the sustained hit stratagem as well?
It's less about sustained. I find that I very rarely have the CP to actually use that. It's quite unlikely. Like, typically, I don't spend CP on them. But what is quite important is actually fishing 46s, because it brings us to the second point. It gives them an increased output against the really tough stuff that you're wounding on 5s.
Yeah.
Yes, on average, it's 2 wounds more that you get from the extra defaults. But that's 2 wounds more, and also that you get the spike potential.
Yeah,
it happens more. When you reroll the hit rolls, you just it's a squad that does surprisingly well into basically everything, and does it far more reliability than many of the other competitors.
No, I like that. And he's also like the cheapest part of the generic Lord. He's like he's like 85 points or something, isn't he? He's very cheap. So you know what? I'll give you that. I'll give that a whirl. Actually, I do actually try something similar to your list. So I will. You have redeemed the Lord of Contagion. I will give him a shot.
Yeah, it's quite funny. It's the standard choice, I would say. The Lord of Virulence that actually I didn't find particularly useful these days, because there's just like the Ruling Wound rolls on the Flamer. It's cool. The list I'm worried about are just not infantry based. I already don't have a problem in the CSM matchup, for example, killing the infantry. I don't have problems killing the infantry in the Eldari matchup. I don't have a problem killing the infantry in the Leagues of Votan matchup. What I'm worried about is vehicles. And for that, he of course just doesn't really do much.
No,
so,
agreed.
Yeah, and his second ability I found, like buffing buffing blast weapons, I found is a bit too niche because just because of how I use my mortars and how my games shape out. The Lord of Violence, you need to see your target, and against the targets you typically want a mortar. It's very hard to get a line of sight with him. I found against opponents that just are capable of basic screening, and that are aware of what the Lord of Violence does, or like the target it's a nice bit of extra damage into them, but against the really choosy ones, I already just don't really need a buff from him.
Yeah,
and yeah. It's my problem. I just didn't find him too useful, and I constantly wish I had a second Lord of Contagion, which is just a very avant-garde. Very avant-garde. I still like Typhus as a solo character. Oh yeah.
Please. Typhus is fantastic. Like, you always take Typhus.
Yeah, because like I said, I typically just he's permitted there for income, and if I get the income matchup, I just want to drop him someplace where you can just see the income, and that is a lot of the times just not really where I want a full unit of Terminators to be, because they're probably just gonna be like 15, 16 inches away from like the next objective. I just need that line of sight. I just need the Typhus ability. I don't need the Terminators attached to them. So I think he's like we said before, he's quite useful as a solo character.
Yeah, I think I need to get more used to running Typhus solo. I do think he is very good solo. And like you said there, I've had games where I've dropped Typhus in because I want to use the Psychic D6 Mortals, but in doing so, it's then put like a unit of Death Shroud like 2 turns away from even being able to charge something, and that's just not what you want to be doing with him. Whereas if you run him solo, he drops in, he can do his smite, and then worst case scenario, he goes on an objective and starts cleansing while still throwing out the D6 Mortals. So no, I think that's a great choice for running Typhus solo. So I think that's most of the list covered. Now you've got entropy cannons on the PBCs. Is that something you actively look to try and use, or is that more just if someone tries to push you with vehicles?
Well, the entropy cannons are. If we imagine you are my opponent, and you ask me, what are my anti-tank guns? I will proudly tell you, entropy cannons. And I will tell you the profile. It's D6 plus 1 damage. And you will be impressed at that point. You will be impressed. And then you ask, what else is in the list? Like, what else is there in anti-tank shooting? I say, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, what this does, from this pre-game talk, is that they want to keep their vehicles away from the PvC, from the entropy cannons. Now, you and I, experienced Death Guard players, we know what does an entropy cannon do in reality?
Jack shit.
Yep. It is a weapon. It is a weapon. It is a weapon that on paper sounds like it can spike upwards. There is the theoretical option. So, what this does is it keeps your opponent honest. It's if you don't have an anti-tank weapon, what people do is they just deploy in the line. They just laugh in your face. They just don't respect you. But just having this option, there's 2 big shots, and he can move 10 inches, and he can shoot 24 inches, and he can reach you here. He can see this lane, down here, so you better stay off there. The players that I'm thinking about, they're very well trained, like they're Pavlov's dogs. Just you tell them there's a threat range. You tell them there's a line of sight that the unit can get to. They are gonna react to it. They will respect it. They want to avoid it. Nobody wants to get shot when they can avoid it. So what it really does is instead of your opponent just deploying the runner on the line, but they're just going to deploy behind that ruin because your PBC might otherwise just shoot them. And this is the value of the entropy cannon. Like
the value is in the mind games, not the damage.
Yeah,
it's true though.
Like the PBCs here, they purely are there for. I don't want to say purely because they do stuff on the table, but they're also really there to shape the game. I think the psychological impact is most of what I'm paying for at this point.
I like it. That's a good way. It's like the world's scariest pillow.
It's also that because it's an artillery piece, your opponents really want to kill it.
Yes.
Nobody likes artillery. It's the pirate of our age, where just you have a chance to kill an artillery piece, you will take it. You will take it.
Yeah, 100%.
And people really like taking risks when it comes to I better take this one out. Otherwise, well, he's gonna shoot me. And they go into positions where, well, I'm gonna shoot them in return. So, but it is all the thought. It is you can take out the mortar before it shoots you. So it's perfect bait. I do find myself occasionally just turning it slightly the wrong way so that
so we can get a line of sight. Oh no, my playtest crawler.
There's just such big models. Oh my.
Sure would be a shame if someone was to shoot it.
Oh, what a clumsy fool I am. Because they are surprisingly durable with the 2-up save, and it's kind of impossible to not get cover with Blackbush Crawler.
Yeah.
They're just models that are just shaped to basically, I'm going to start with cover. They're going to get cover. It doesn't matter what I do, they're going to get cover. So having like a 4-up save against like a Bright Lance, Darklands, and so on, it makes it surprisingly swingy just going into them, especially when you consider stuff like Cloud of Flies in them. So what happened, for example, in my game against round 2 game against the first Dowry, was that he had this plan. He could, with his high mobility, use his high mobility to get close to me, to get these steep angles to take up my Plagueburst Crawlers. He had like 3 Ravagers invested and 2 Warwalkers. He bounced a bit. But even if the Alpha Strike had succeeded, that was an absolutely horrible idea. Because what I'm scared about when I'm reading a list like his Warwalkers, his Ravagers, there's a lot of these small pieces. This is a list that wants to play Horse Archer against you. That just wants to ride around your threat range and just shoot you while you can do nothing about it until you eventually one lucky arrow finds you.
Yeah.
This is really what I don't want in my life. So what I want them is to come close and shoot some stuff. Because the moment they come close, go for the steep angles, well, my Plague Marines can jump forward and enact revenge. Glorious revenge. So that was kind of the plan there. I didn't bother hiding everything perfectly. I just wanted angles steep enough to give him the option, go for the Alpha Strike, go kill a Plaguebush Crawler. I don't really care too much. Using a Plaguebush Crawler, that's fine in this matchup. Like I said, in the Eldari matchup, kind of half the value is already keeping all of the stuff that you want to mortar off the board. Like once the Warp Spiders and Shadow Spectres and so on, once they're off the board, like what are you really going to shoot at? Typically that just means you can mortar the Incarn, you can mortar a Night Spinner, you can mortar, I don't know, some form of vehicle, and just it's not going to do anything anyway.
Your best bet's like maybe a Warwalker, maybe.
Nah, not even then. Like it's just unlikely.
Yeah, you're not killing anything.
Yeah, you didn't average 24 Plaguebush Crawler shots to just kill a Warwalker. It just maybe you get it, but most likely you're going to survive on 2 wounds and just meh.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, even more, because they're saving at 3-ups. Oh, well, I forget it. Like, the point is...
I tried.
It's basically, they put all of the stuff they want to mortar. They already put it off the board. So it doesn't really matter too much anymore. It's not like the entropy cannon is ever going to get into range of anything juicy, like a fire prison, say, for example. If your opponent gets you get a fire prison with a plague crawler, then you've won the game already from the outset. So yeah, my point was they are good bait because people hate artillery more than anything else in the world. Everyone hates indirect.
Yeah, even as people who use indirect, we're just like, yeah, this is toxic, but I'm going to use it. It's grim. So yeah, okay, that's a great example for why the entropy cannon's there. It's more of a mind game and making your opponents have to respect you, even if maybe they realistically don't have to, but they have to. So my only question now is, because we've obviously gone through every part of the list, and I think I don't want to keep you too much longer. I want you to be able to enjoy the rest of the day. My only question remaining would be, do you think there's any changes you'd make to the list? You said before maybe the Lord of Virulence is looking a bit meh. And is there any sort of other experimentation you want to do with the list? Will you continue running Mortulus? Go ahead.
I think the one thing that I'm quite set on, and I basically submitted for 3 CTS leagues that I'm focused on right now, is that I'm changing the heavy plague weapons to robotic weapons on the plague points. Why, you might ask? This is absolute madness.
Yeah, that's a take.
That is a take, because one weapon is strictly superior to the other, isn't it? It just does more damage against everything that is not a guardsman.
Yes.
But, hear me out here. I don't send my plague marines in there to get the good spike damage into a carnivore. Like, I don't send them in to kill a full health carnivore. When my plague marines go in, they go in against a 1 wound, 2 wound carnivore. I don't need the big spike damage. What I need from my plague marines is reliability. I just want them to do that 1 damage. And it's the unfortunate reality about weapon skill 4 is that I had way too many situations where I just needed them to get 1 wound through. They just decided to roll a whole lot of 3s.
I don't know what it is about weapon skill 4. Like, the odds and the math say it's 50-50, but it never feels it.
Yeah. You just kind of constantly bounce between spikes. And just getting the 3 extra attacks and weapon skill 3, it might just be worth it. I might also just very quickly regret my decision.
But you gotta try it.
But I gotta try it. I'm convinced that it is the smartest choice I've ever made. I'm not that convinced. But I'm really fed up with just this problem of the unreliability of the Plague Marine melee. That's kind of one of the problems that really caused me some headache so far. There's just been too many situations there.
I think when you run it in a 10-man squad, you've got enough attacks to sort of make up for it. But if you're in the 5-man squads, one bad roll can just really make that unit go from doing damage to doing nothing.
Yeah, and it's also that a lot of the times when I'm sending them in for mobility, and I just need them to do that last wound to a model, for example, so they can consolidate onto an objective. Them being stuck there after not having done that wound, that is actually really catastrophic. That can be like a 10-point swing depending on secondaries, for example.
Oh yeah. If you don't get an objective, you can lose Storm Hostile. They also get 5 on their primary from it. Like you said, there's 10 points right there gone.
Yeah. So when I'm looking at output, when it comes to media output, I think just having that second load of contagion there with Death Rod, that's 2 units that hit very hard for the price point. So I'm quite happy giving up a bit of the damage for the Plague Marines, a bit of the spike potential there, to get a bit of extra reliability in there.
Yeah.
The other thing is that for me, because I'm pretty new to the faction, I still have a lot of experimenting to do. I was thinking about Blightlord's Terminators the other day, and I was quite sad of just spending the 100 points I get from Cut and Deal of Violence, spending them on just changing the Death Shrouds to Blightlords, because I'm convinced they're not a bad unit. They're not a bad unit in kind of a very similar situation. They have a bunch of things going for them. My biggest problem is probably just that the way you get damage out of Blightlords is special weapons. That's kind of the major difference to the Death Shots. And what's really annoying about special weapons is that it's a lot of activations. So I was thinking about, I have 2 Blightlords, with, including, for example, Plague Spears, and then I gave every one of my Plague Marine squads a Plague Spear. And then I thought it through. Each time you use a special weapon, you have to explain to your opponent the first 5-6 times what it does. Is it D6 Flamer, Strength 5, -1 point damage? Then you roll the number of shots, you get 3 shots. You ask your opponent for the toughness, they tell you the toughness, you say, I wound in 5s. You roll your dice, it's 2 wounds. How many wounds? They shout across the loud table. 2 wounds. They roll their saves. What's the AP? It's AP -1. Okay, I failed 1. What's the damage? It's damage 1. And they mark that 1 wound they just lost. And it might not sound like much, but it's like 15-second interchange when it just happens constantly, especially wound marking and counting of dice. Special weapons cost a lot of time across a game. And for me, the time is already relatively short. When you just have to set up a table, and your opponent is maybe a couple of minutes late, and you start your clock at like 1:15, and then you have to use, like in an MSU list, you have to use your units. Like you can't just have all units sit back. In order to get damage, you need all of your stuff to happen. So the mere idea is to just have 8 flamers that every single time I need to roll them out, and I thought it was just too much. And it's not just the flamers. It's just, then you have the Reaper, and then you have your Plague Bolters, and it's 3 different weapons. Then you have 2 different weapons in melee. It becomes exhausting. It's one of my big gripes probably with Plague Marines and Blightlord Terminators. It's just how annoying it is to just have all these different weapons. Like, I do want to use these different weapons. I really do. It would be a net positive for me. It just takes so much time.
That's fair.
Yeah, so it's probably something I will do once I have the list better under control, and I have a couple of minutes extra. That I will just add Plague Spears in.
Yeah, I agree that I think Blightlords in general are a bit underappreciated. I think they can be better than people think. I want to try out Blightlords as well at some point. I'm just not sure what to sort of replace for them. It's a tough one.
Yeah, there's just more stuff in the codex. There's just a lot of stuff in the codex that is at least worth a consideration, because the stuff is really dirt cheap in a lot of ways. You can find a use case for a lot of these data sheets. They might not be the most amazing thing you've ever seen, but they're cheap enough that you can think of the scenarios where they are really useful. Except for plate surgeons, of course.
Thank you. So I was waiting for that. I was like, please tell me he's bad. Plague Surgeon bad, Don Hooson. Plague Surgeon bad. He's actually made a Plague Surgeon with my name on the base, and he's taken it to an RTT this weekend, and I've set him a goal that by the end of it, the Plague Surgeon has to have killed a character alone. So we'll see how that goes.
Nothing bad for that. And that's kind of the problem. I don't think he's worth it, but I can also see use cases for the Plague Surgeon. I don't think it's wasted points. I'm just gonna put redacted beeping over that part. It's like I'm gonna really badly edit your voice so it says, no, the Plague Surgeon is literally useless. No, I get what you mean though. Like, stuff's so cheap at the moment, it's ridiculous. Yeah. It is so weird that it didn't drop in points for whatever reason.
Yeah, everyone else did, pal. They were just like, nope, not him, not that guy. Maybe someone at GW hates that character as much as I do. But yeah, is there anything else you'd like to go over, mate?
No, I think we have a pretty good understanding of why I did some things that I did. And yeah.
I really like it. It's been a good deep dive into the list, to be honest. Carry on, go on.
Yeah, you know. We've also talked about all of the important things like Morty. So yeah.
Or why not to Morty? No, I'm happy. Like, I'm very happy about this one. I'm dead interested to talk about the list and answered a lot of my questions. Again, for people who are listening, if you want more of an event breakdown for Matt, what was the event called again, Matt?
The second Austrian GT.
There you go. So if you want a breakdown of the second Austrian GT, his actual game-by-game recap, check out Contact Loss podcast, because it was a long interview as well, wasn't it, Max? I think it was an hour and a half with Tomek. But yeah, it's got a full breakdown there with every game. Obviously, lots of detail. Tomek does fantastic interviews, much better than I do. I'm still learning the ropes of all this. So it's cool if you want to go check out the events. And then, obviously we've covered the list here, changes and sort of like the reasons for him building his list, which I've actually really enjoyed. Would you like to give any shout outs, Matt?
I'm probably going to give a shout out to the Tryhard server, the Tryhard community, which has been something I'm very proud of with the other High Lords have built up over the last years, and it's become a great place to go to I would say, for any of your TTS demands and to chat about competitive Warhammer. It's a great place. Go Tryhard.
Is there any? Is it a Discord server, Tryhard, or is it?
It is a Discord server, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to send us the link for that, I can put it in the description. So if people want to join, they can do so. Assuming it's open invite, that is.
It is an open, but you're actually required to write an introductory sentence. We set high bars around here.
That is very high bars, so you have to at least tell them your name.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, so you throw us that after this, and we'll make sure that's obviously in the bottom. Like I said, check out Contest as well. Thank you very much for joining us today then and going through your list. And I'm very excited now to try multi-list lists. And I think it's quite interesting because people have been wanting to have reasons not to take Morty. And I may have been at fault for ragging on how auto take Morty is. And now I can kind of see from the other side. And now I'm actually excited to see what I can do with 325 points more to play with in generic Death Guard units. So I'm actually quite excited. So thank you very much for coming on, mate, and for sharing your experience for your list, the reasons why. And yeah, anyone listening, if you enjoyed listening to this today, please leave a like, subscribe. YouTube algorithm is a horrible monster. So it really does help. And if you really want to support us, feel free to become a member, get access to Discord and whatnot for our server. But yeah, once again, thank you very much for coming on, mate. Any final words?
It was an absolute pleasure being here. I only recently found the channel and been thoroughly enjoying the content. Good stuff, yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, hopefully we'll hear from you again soon when you destroy more events, hopefully. Morty or Morty-listless? I don't even know anymore. but yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again at some point. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you later.